All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone to the Networking Masterclass Americas session for June 2020. And if you're looking at your webinar dashboard and thinking that this looks a little bit different, you would not be incorrect. So that would be right, is what I'm saying. So today, the webinar, we're trying it a little bit differently since we've had a lot of feedback about the phone lines and trouble hearing us well. We've decided to try this webinar with VoIP only or computer audio only today. So if you're not hearing me yet, I invite you to go ahead and check the audio device which you're outputting the audio, perhaps the volume control for that, because today VoIP is your only option. So there is no ability to phone in to the webinar this month. Next month, we'll go back to allowing both computer audio and phone calls. So that's very different for today. Hopefully you can hear me well. If not, I encourage you to try changing your audio device or perhaps joining from a mobile line instead of a fixed internet line if that's available to you. Next, our webinar is live and it's not the same without your direct input. So we really appreciate and really enjoy it when you post your questions or give us feedback throughout the webinar, specifically during the topics that we'll be discussing, so that we can get that into the presenters and try to answer your questions live online. If for some reason we can't get to your question during the webinar itself, we invite you to email us at networkingmasterclass@citrix.com so that we can get back to you accordingly after the webinar is concluded today. Finally, this session is being recorded, so if you need to step away or perhaps you just like to explore some of the content or listen to it again in your own time after the webinar, we'll be sharing a link in an email following the webinar so that you can come back and get some of the information again if you'd like to, or perhaps you'd like to share it with a colleague or a friend. So rest assured, if you need to step away or you have to miss some of this, the session is recorded and you'll be able to come back and catch up later. So who's with us today? I'm your host, Dave Potter. I'm a solutions architect and I run the Americas session. And joining us today are guest presenters Valerie DiMartino, she's from product marketing, and Shoaib Youssef from product management. Valerie and Shoaib will be talking to us quite a bit and extensively about Citrix SD-WAN. So the topic for today is all about enabling business continuity using the Citrix SD-WAN and planning for your network, basically planning your network around the new model, which is working from home. So after that, I'll follow up and round out the webinar with some news and views for the month. And we'll have a prize giveaway at the end of the webinar, and we'll round things out with my closing thoughts and notes. So we do have a prize today. I'll go into that in just a moment, but we always love your feedback. I mentioned the Q&A panel. So real quick, if you like the topic today, or perhaps you'd like to see some similar or related topics, or perhaps there's some topics that we haven't covered at all, I invite you to provide some feedback in the Q&A panel. Let us know what you're thinking. Are the topics hitting the mark for you? Would you like to see something different? We invite you to submit any new ideas or any ideas at all into the Q&A tab for consideration in a future masterclass webinar. So the giveaway today, I'm actually really excited about this one. This is the first for us, and the giveaway today is a smart mug. This is the Ember Mug 2. It's a temperature-controlled smart mug. So basically, I believe it has a battery inside, and it will heat up your beverages. I have not had the chance or the opportunity to test or try one of these out myself. So I'm very curious and very excited to see how it goes, and very excited to be able to share this as the prize giveaway at the end of the webinar. So pay attention to the content coming up, to Valerie and Shoaib's content, and I'll be asking a question from one of the presenters at the end of the webinar, and the first person that comes up with the answer will be eligible to win this awesome Ember Mug prize at the end of the webinar. So stick around, I think it'll be fun. All right, so with that, I'd like to begin our first section here, planning your network from home. So I'd like to bring on our first guest presenter. So with that, Valerie, can I bring you off mute and make you the presenter?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, I can hear you, and you have control.
Okay, let me switch views here. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Valerie DiMartino. I am Senior Product Marketing Manager for SD-WAN. Been working with it for about 3 years now. Um, very exciting product, constantly changing and evolving, and so much going on to support so many different initiatives. This one will be focused again on the work from home or really small, micro, or ad hoc type branches as well. As you are well aware of the business disruptions going on at the moment, they're really impacting every type of organization across any location. So no matter what size or vertical you're in, you're being impacted by this most likely. And that means that you need to be thinking pretty much every day about your business continuity plans and being able to ensure that the employee base and the business operations are able to be flexible and scale quickly to react in these times to ensure that work continues on and applications are available. Ensuring productivity is probably your main goal, making sure that the applications can be accessed and preventing threats from coming in. So this presentation will look at some of the specific things that you need to address as part of your business continuity plans and how Citrix SD-WAN is poised to help. So going over some of the challenges and obstacles that you might be facing. Many of the households where users are now connecting in for work really have just procured enough bandwidth for leisure activities, streaming, internet browsing, gaming, things like that. And now everybody's at home all day long during the day, competing for bandwidth. You've got neighborhoods, competing for bandwidth as well, centralized offices and things like that. Um, now you have to reassess bandwidth needs, and with these um, remote education and remote work type applications, they're very bandwidth hungry and they're putting that strain on the capacity of the network. Many of us take broadband for granted. In certain areas, rural areas, it might be prohibitive, in cost or in availability. So we have to take into account what kinds of connectivity is available to users in different locations. In traditional enterprise environments, normally you control everything: quality of your WAN links, positioning of your Wi-Fi, segmentation of your network, and even the physical access that employees have. Obviously now the level of the workplace environment control does not exist. So what's likely is some of the employees that you have may never have worked from home. So their view of the internet might be quite different, more leisure activities like gaming, such as Fortnite or Netflix, and not really critical business applications. Although, your kids might think that Fortnite is a critical business application or a critical application. So security, obviously top of mind. You have VPNs that were not built to handle an entire remote workforce. They're not, um, they're either open or closed. They're not as granular as they need to be. They're more complex to manage in that case, and then they need to be patched to keep up with cyber attacks. So that's something, you've got people now that are not used to different types of phishing attacks that might come up. You have this untrained human element that is not maybe necessarily practicing the same cyber hygiene that they would if they were in the office. And, can you penetrate test your family? Yeah. Don't think we can depend on users to do that. So we need to be aware that when you have VPNs and you have these trusted users coming in, if they have poor Wi-Fi security, that could be an entry point into the trusted user into the corporate network. So that is something that hackers may try to exploit. Um, so that's another thing with VPNs. And then a single internet link is another issue. Now that you're at home, you have just one link and you have many users doing many different things online. And so you're running into different problems in terms of bandwidth capacity, latency. You've got applications taking too long to share information. You've got call quality issues, jitter, carrier outages, and drops of sessions and calls. So these are all of very, very concerning to running a business. And then in terms of making sure your business, your employees can access their applications, you can't just simply just order them laptops and ship them all out. That's not logistically uh, viable. So you've got sort of BYOD options now coming to the forefront. You've got now having to deploy virtual desktops, whether it's Windows or Citrix virtual desktops. You've got to gain more capacity by moving those to the cloud when you increase. And you've got to make sure that you can connect back from the cloud to the data center where your Active Directories and backend databases are, and different on-prem applications. So you've got to have those kinds of private connections now as well. So as you can see here, it's just a snapshot of what we've captured as far as some of the interesting, points that the news articles are making. So lots of buzz around telecommuting and whether it's here to stay or not. So I think in some capacity it will be. Perhaps when the orders are lifted, people will really want to go back to work, but there will definitely need to be the option to have work from home part of the time, or in case something happens again where we need to quickly onboard remote work again, is something to be aware of. So we've come up with 5 key objectives for working from home with Citrix SD-WAN. So we want to make sure that you can quickly and reliably connect your workforce at scale. We want to ensure a quality experience when the workers connect to their applications. They need to be secure and your business needs to remain compliant. You have to have visibility, centralized control, that kind of thing, even though you are working from home. And you want to make your Citrix virtual apps and desktops better for every worker as well. So in terms of workforce connectivity, we see this as equating directly to business continuity. It doesn't matter if you're open, if your workforce can't connect, then that's going to be an issue. And the barriers are complexity, cost, speed, and scale. So being able to provide reliable connectivity at scale is very much, I'm sure, top of mind. So the next thing is our new Citrix SD-WAN 110 device. This is our new work from home or micro branch device, and we're really excited that this is now available. It's very simple and economical, meaning that your users don't have to do the configuration. They're really just doing the plug and play part of it. And what's really exciting is the built-in LTE capabilities, which Schwabe is going to really dive into when he goes into the routing section. And then, so this really gives you your users another option where they can use LTE alongside of broadband, so that keeping, low cost, keeping an OpEx model and keeping it simple, and being able to remotely configure or pre-configure this device and scale it out to your workforce is something that we can accomplish. And then there's also zero-touch deployment templates to get you up and running. And we don't want to forget about the different types of businesses right now. It's not just about working from home, although probably most of you are in that scenario, but also different types of pop-up or ad hoc type branches, as we call them, which have come up either as a result of COVID or just, have always been around in terms of being able to just need to get offices up quickly for a certain amount of time. Think even, warehouses, construction sites, distribution, things like that. Uber Eats is, something like, how can you run a business if you can't take orders remotely or virtually? So those are just some of the examples that we've come up with. So what Citrix SD-WAN does is it provides intelligence, whether it's connection intelligence and application intelligence. It's going to allow the users to get the best experience with their home grade broadband during the daytime alongside other users in the house. Um, so with connection intelligence, Citrix SD-WAN is going to ensure that experience for whether it's virtual desktops, voice traffic, video, CRM, ERP, really any type of business application, whether you're sharing broadband or not. It's going to help mitigate outages. Again, this is where the LTE can really come in, and manage backup metered links or in conjunction with broadband. We actually have the ability to do 2 broadband connections natively within Citrix SD-WAN, and it's going to give you really good resiliency. We have the selective packet replication or duplication, as you may have heard in the past, where we can send the same packets over 2 different links and race them to the other end, to ensure reliability and ensure that the packets don't get dropped. And then we have the integration with ICA or ICA protocol with our HDX traffic, our virtual traffic. We do a lot of optimization with Office 365. We're a qualified, independently verified partner, to optimize Office 365 traffic and locally break that trusted traffic out. So really, it's a great use case to handle all different types of traffic. We can identify and classify and steer 4,500 applications, including those individual Office 365 apps. And we can basically act as an overlay, which Schwabe is going to go into how we do all of that. But we have a deep packet inspection as well as an application identification engine working in conjunction, to bring a lot of intelligence. We have bidirectional quality of service, which means that both the sending end and the destination are managed for latency, packet loss, and jitter. It's configured centrally. We have a SD-WAN orchestrator, which is our SaaS-based management tool, which networking teams can use to manage everything centrally and configuration and monitoring and all of that. So that's something that's built into our subscription pricing, which is really nice. And we have brand new fantastic dashboards in there as well, especially for our virtual apps and desktops traffic. So we have the ability to do fine-grained quality of service for our HDX traffic, virtual apps and desktops traffic. Again, we can actually see into the streams and treat the different types of traffic as individual applications with their own prioritization. It can get very granular, which is really very good for handling this traffic, whether it's over a single port or multi-port configurations. That's an option available. And then out-of-the-box templates and policies that can be configured, including security policies with our built-in stateful firewall. So moving into security, we've touched on, the VPN sort of conundrum or problem. It's just really probably not the ideal solution for most businesses to use as their only remote access and security. SD-WAN would be a far better solution for making sure that you provide the right access to the right people and keep everything nice and secure. So we do have built-in encryption. We have the ability to connect automatically through IPsec connections to your choice of secure web gateway, whether that's Zscaler or Palo Alto or whatever. That's something we always like to provide a lot of choice with our security in terms of whether you want to use an existing vendor or not. We manage all that centrally through policies, and we can definitely scale up to thousands of workers with doing a lot of remote deployment and capabilities, including zero touch. So visibility and scale. So again, you don't want to have your users being impacted with these error messages and warnings. If you can't see it, you can't fix it. So you've got to know what these problems are before they happen to get ahead of them. And last but not least, our deep integration with our Citrix virtual apps and desktops. One of the key use cases I'd like to call out again is that if you have those virtual desktop agent or virtual delivery agents, sorry, up in the cloud, if you decide to move to Azure or whatever, you really still need to have that great connectivity back to the data center for those back-end needs, including Active Directory. And we can definitely get you set up with that cloud to data center connectivity use case very quickly and cost effectively. So do make sure that you're asking if you're looking at, an MPLS or a VPN or a network connectivity from a cloud. How long is it going to take? Is it expensive to deploy? It really depends on your unique use case, whether you have something in place or not. But SD-WAN is a great way to add a lot of reliability to that use case. So that's something that I definitely want to call out. And I mentioned some of the other features that we have in terms of our auto quality of service with our HDX traffic and things like that. So I think at this time we will stop and take a break and do a quick fun poll. So Dave, if you want to kick that off, the first one.
Sure.
It's a bit of
So,
a fun one here.
so I'd like to ask the audience now, what is your favorite work from home spot? We all know that everyone is most likely or more than likely working from home unless you are business critical and one of the only people in the office. And I guess we forgot to put the actual corporate office on this list, but if you guys wouldn't mind participating in the poll, I see a lot of responses already coming in. Seems like a majority are saying home office, which should come as no surprise. Nobody's working from the garage.
And while we're doing this, I don't know if you can transition over to Schwabe at this time.
Sure.
Great. He's
All
going
right,
to
so
go
we're going to
through some
continue
really
to run the
exciting use
poll.
cases. Thank you.
Thanks, Valerie. So we're going to continue to run the poll and we'll close it out in just a second. So if you kindly answer the question for us, it's just a bit of fun for us to see where's everyone working from? Are you in your backyard because it's a nice warm day, or are you stuck inside with the blinds closed because it's too hot? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll, and just for kicks, I'm going to share out the results here. So we got one person in the garage, so awesome. That could be me. But clearly a majority of you are working from your home office, and few of you are enjoying the great outdoors or the convenience and comfort of your bedrooms. And I think someone's cooking, perhaps. We should probably explore the cooking stream a little bit. All right, so with that, Shoaib, I'd like to bring you on as our next presenter.
Thank you, Dave. Hopefully you could hear me okay.
Yes, you sound good.
All right, and you should be seeing my screen at this point. Okay.
Looks good.
All right, thank you. And from a use case scenario, I want to double click into some of the different use cases that Citrix SD-WAN provides. So I just want to start off by saying the solution is very flexible. It solves a lot of wide area network problems. We'll dive into the use case for home users, but there's definitely other use cases that are very useful for Citrix SD-WAN. So with the topic at hand, we'll first look at cloud migration. So Citrix workloads and Windows virtual desktops, they're being migrated over to cloud. And this is purposely being done because people are at home and they need to access apps and data, and the cloud is a great source of those resources. So with Citrix SD-WAN, what we do is we enable connectivity to those cloud services. So instead of those pricey, express routes or direct connect options, we can enable that connectivity by leveraging peer SD-WAN devices, one instance in the cloud and maybe a hardware or a virtual appliance in the data center. And we leverage public internet links, and we encrypt those links using the SD-WAN technology to provide a faster, cheaper, more scalable option. You can add additional bandwidth, additional internet links to your data center as your bandwidth needs increase. So again, that's keeping your storage and some applications in Active Directory on-prem and enabling routing and connectivity through SD-WAN to cloud workloads. Okay, so SD-WAN virtual appliances are available in AWS, Azure, GCP. We're in tech preview with Oracle Cloud, but really it allows you to use any cloud with an SD-WAN virtual instance sitting at the edge of that network. Now, for this discussion, business continuity, we want to make sure that we are addressing the home user use case. So with those applications being offloaded to the cloud, we can deploy an SD-WAN at the home user location and make use of the available internet transports, whether it's DSL, cable, LTE, to enable a more reliable connection to those resources and workloads, whether they're in the cloud or whether they're still on-prem at the data center. Really, we're addressing a problem of reliable network connectivity. So one of the things that essentially this solution would be replacing something like a VPN solution, right? So where VPNs fall short is really you're dependent on a reliable internet connection at your home, which not everybody has. And you're dependent on essentially a certain amount of bandwidth being available, which VPN can't really scale for bandwidth requirements. And you're also at a certain degree at a security risk because you have sensitive data that is now on your device, on your home location. And with VPNs, you're essentially allowed connectivity into corporate resources. So security is really a big major concern with that solution. Now, utilizing Citrix SD-WAN, we are directly addressing those problems, but also utilizing Citrix SD-WAN plus our Citrix virtual apps and desktops, we're really covering the gauntlet of different hurdles that you have to go through in order to achieve a successful work from home deployment. Okay. So from the common networking issues, which is the area of SD-WAN, we're addressing the needs for bandwidth, network reliability, because we're diversifying the type of transports that we have available, and we're directly addressing the issue that a lot of home users are complaining about. That single internet link that's a shared resource, not only with your household, but with your neighbors, it's unreliable and is not always available. So depending on the use case, there are scenarios where you're working from home, but you don't need constant reliability. CVAD by itself does a great job in handling those. But there are other scenarios where you're a home user, but you need consistent, reliable 24/7 connectivity without failure because you're handling sensitive communication with customers or you're doing webinars like this, so you need reliable connectivity. So a popular solution is taking your existing internet link and augmenting that with an LTE service, which is what the 110 device, as Valerie mentioned earlier, is capable of doing. So a big selling point for this home worker, work from home type scenario is the Citrix SD-WAN 110 and 210 devices that have the integrated LTE, which makes it easy to kind of consolidate what's needed in terms of hardware to provide you SD-WAN plus leverage LTE as another source of internet.
Hey, Shweb, there's a question in here that's pretty interesting in terms of the LTE. Does the activation just work on demand? Maybe you could talk about the dual SIM a little bit more as you get into the presentation.
Oh, absolutely. I'll cover those topics. But the solution of the 110, it does require your administrative team or yourself to provide a data SIM. So it's a standard size SIM that you inject into the SD-WAN device. You can kind of have a variance of those SIMs. So the 110 has 2 SIM slots available. It's a single integrated modem, but you have an input of 2 SIM slots that will act as a active and standby state. So you can have maybe an AT&T SIM in slot 1, a Verizon SIM in slot 2, and depending on which one's available and active, the device will leverage that. Okay. So definitely a good question, and we'll cover a little bit more on that detail later on in the deck here. So, that use case of work from home, really it's critical when you're running UCaaS application, Unified Communication as a Service type applications. And you might be running those apps in the cloud and they're very highly sensitive to poor network conditions. So if the quality of the home internet link is low, your voice over IP communication is going to suffer. So that impacts the business directly when it comes to, you know, certain people that that handle call center type workload. And if that link is unreliable, you might randomly be dropped during important meetings that are highly critical to the business. So you need something that is more reliable, and this is where the Citrix SD-WAN devices come in and address that need directly. And what the solution does is it provides an overlay network that creates communication between peer SD-WAN devices. So it's an SD-WAN device in your home office connecting to an SD-WAN device that's located in the cloud or the data center. And that directly solves the common problems when you're working from home, that addressing the segment of the network that commonly has reliability issues and bandwidth issues. So you can get away with not having an SD-WAN, again, as I mentioned earlier. However, there are users that are not they're not effective without an SD-WAN device to ensure that they're always going to have that network available to them to access their apps and access their data. And a similar use case, let's say you're not migrating to the cloud, but you are keeping connectivity to virtual apps and desktops, and those apps and desktops are using UCaaS applications like Teams and Zoom. And in this scenario, you're essentially backhauling through a central site. And we're addressing the same problem here. That's the last mile connectivity at the home users. Not everybody has that reliable internet link, and you can't always be dependent on that link. But in addition to that, we're also enabling more intelligent level of routing to proxy through maybe the nearest branch office to reduce latency, instead of everyone going through high latency central data centers. The solution can add levels of routing redundancy and fallback to redundant sites. If the primary site becomes unavailable, then there's an alternative site to essentially obtain access to the same applications. In addition to that, alternatively, you can even enable local breakout at the home office using on-prem devices internet service. And this would even further reduce the latency between the users and the applications. Further, you can enable connectivity to data center resources using a more reliable overlay network with the SD-WAN. With the home user use case, for security perspective, you may want to run incoming connections through a DMZ and restrict connectivity to resources or segments of the corporate network with strict firewall policies. With the on-prem SD-WAN device, you have another layer of enforcement with the integrated stateful firewall that 110 device comes with. And that can be used to either allow, or more importantly, not allow over certain traffic through that overlay tunnel or that virtual path that we have connected to the corporate network. So that allows you to stop the communication at that branch office device, where a VPN solution will allow it through, and you have to stop it at the data center. So those are some use cases for the Citrix SD-WAN, more focused towards the home user scenarios. Again, SD-WAN is very flexible. There's a lot of different platforms with different feature functionalities, and there's a lot of different use cases for the SD-WAN solution. But for the home user specifically, there's new publication that we have available in our Citrix Tech Zone that covers a tech brief on the home user use case. Some of the detail that I'm covering in the presentation coming up will be there in more granular detail. Some design decisions that you should make when you're enabling a work from home scenario. There's also a POC guide that will help when you're leveraging SD-WAN Orchestrator as the central management tool. It kind of gives you a step-by-step process of how to enable a work from home user. So those are all valuable resources. I know links are hard to see in a presentation, so what I'll do is at the end of the presentation, we'll just dump all the consolidated links that we have in this deck, and we'll share it through maybe the chat or the question. Okay, before we get into that, maybe this is a good time to stop and do one of the polling questions, the next polling question that we have, Dave.
Sure. So I'd like to take a break and now ask everyone in the audience, What do you consider to be the most important factor in selecting an SD-WAN home user solution? So, few options here for you. So we're seeing a few people here. It looks like it's pretty much a tie for a number of them. So what do you consider to be the most important factor in selecting your SD-WAN home user solution? And if this isn't your solution, maybe a solution that you would like to have. All right, looks like just we're having about 20% of you have voted. We'll run the poll for just a few more seconds. I know sometimes you have to switch around to bring up the webinar to front and center to be able to interact with it. So give everyone a minute to finish that off. Looks like we have just over half of the audience having voted. So I'll go ahead and close out the poll. And it looks like the clear answer here is on network reliability, with a close second being security considerations. All right, with that, back to you, Shoaib.
Thank you so much, Dave. All right, and we'll cover essentially design considerations. So assuming you're a network admin and you want to roll out an SD-WAN 110 home user scenario, I'm going to cover some of the details that are available with this solution. So if you're interested in it, things to consider essentially when you're designing the network. So the first one is home user network design. Now there's a lot of dependencies there, right? Every home user is unique in terms of what type of network connectivity they have, what functionality they're looking for, what type of devices that they're looking to connect into the SD-WAN device. So that's important. Identify the available WAN conditions that you have at home users as an admin is important, and identifying the Citrix SD-WAN platform that suits the needs of that user. And next, it's step number 2 is then taking that information and designing user topologies essentially. And in Orchestrator, we have the site profiles and templates, which allows you to manage the home user use cases centrally from a single point. One of the suggestions I typically make there to the administrators is you want to limit the number of use cases. In order to make your life easier, you want to make it manageable. There's going to be several different variances of what people have in terms of connectivity, but you want to keep it limited so that you don't have a lot of different scenarios that you have to support. Site profiles allows you to do that. You can create a site profile, you need an ISP, you need an LTE, and that's the only scenario that I'm willing to support as a home user administrator. And in Orchestrator, you can take those profiles and you could quickly create and replicate users and create sites using the Orchestrator tool. So very friendly in terms of making it easy to create configuration for SD-WAN home user deployments. The other things that you need to consider when you're actually rolling out the solution is that it's designed for easy deployment as an installer. So it's easy enough for a home user to be able to follow simple instructions by plugging in Ethernet cables and turning on the device. But you could always leverage third-party partners to maybe perform those operations for you or stage the devices before they're actually shipped to users. It's fairly flexible in terms of how you want to manage that rollout. And one of the key things to understand is that the branch devices are the ones that initiate the call home process to cloud services. So by factory default, as soon as they're cabled for internet and they're powered on, they leverage their serial number and they call home with that to obtain a configuration and join an SD-WAN network. So it's important to understand that the serial number is key. And it's important to understand that the devices, they will call home, and then once they have their configuration, you want to account for continued connectivity to that device so that you can run analytics on that device and you can perform further configuration changes. So we'll dive into the details of that coming up here. So let's double click into the first one, network design. I just want to cover some important discussion points when it comes to designing the home user network. Some key functionalities with available in SD-WAN, the available WAN services that allow for flexibility with the solution to address the problems of that home user and their needs. So as an admin, what problem are you trying to solve with the SD-WAN, right? You're trying to solve local WAN links, connectivity that may be shared with the different WAN services that are available and the different users that may be on that network. So as an admin, you're not required to utilize all the WAN services. You can pick and choose what serves the user best. But there's things to consider when you're designing the site in terms of what WAN services to enable. So when you're leveraging the virtual path service, you want to limit the reach of that connectivity to the corporate network. And that could mean segregating the network so that the home users only touch certain resources that are in the data center, and you're creating firewall barriers to make sure that the home users don't go too far into the corporate network. And the virtual path service enables that, right? It's essentially a backhaul tool that leverages multiple WAN links, and it creates a tunnel between peer SD-WAN devices, and you're leveraging multiple underlay transports, underlay WAN links that are used in creation of that virtualized tunnel. So it's really an extension of your corporate network to the home network, and you're leveraging technology that the SD-WAN provides to load balance the traffic across an aggregated tunnel, which means you're leveraging all the bandwidth that tunnel and those underlay networks have to offer. And that gives you WAN resiliency because you're going to typically leverage multiple different diverse internet providers, making sure that if one internet provider goes down, you have another one as a fallback, or a third one or fourth one as a fallback, to ensure, again, a 24/7 always-on connectivity to the resources that are most important. And then between SD-WAN devices, there's also a quality of service engine that ensures that the higher priority applications are going to be served the best across the higher priority or more readily available WAN links. So that's just that's the virtual path service. There's also the internet service. You can leverage the SD-WAN as an internet load balancer for site locations in addition to that virtual path service. So you can add this capability. It's more of a session-based load balancing, where if one user, one session may be assigned to the first WAN link, and the second session may be assigned to the second WAN link. And then if one of the WAN links fails, the sessions merge onto the available WAN links. So that provides you reliability for internet. And again, you're using the same underlay WAN links that are diverse and readily available and won't conflict with one another. And that gives you internet resiliency, okay? We also have other functionalities where you can create tunnels to secure web gateway services like Zscaler and ForcePoint and Palo Alto. And that allows you to create IPsec and GRE tunnels. So it serves as a VPN solution to have a VPN tunnel to those services to serve for off-prem firewall. So for the internet service use case, there is an integrated firewall, stateful firewall on the solution that can protect the network. But if you want to not leverage that firewall and you rather use a secure web gateway service, that is an option. So the solution is quite flexible in what services you enable. Now, when you've identified the connectivity options for your home user, this is where you want to limit the scope of what use cases you want to support. There's more use cases than what I have here, but the most common ones that we see are leveraging two WAN links that are non-LTE links. Okay, so maybe you want to take a DSL and augment that with a Comcast link, and you have high resiliency and ample bandwidth, okay? So on the right, there's also the leveraging the 110 LTE model and inserting, again, a data SIM right into that SD-WAN devices and using that LTE link as either a standby link or an on-demand link based on the LTE data subscription. And if you choose, you can keep that link always active. So if you have an unlimited data plan on your SIM that you're inserting into that, you can just use that as you would. The first option is a dual dual link that you're actively using simultaneously. So as you're creating the use cases, you want to identify how you want to leverage traffic for the backhaul, leveraging the virtual path service, and how you want to leverage the traffic for the internet service. And both of those solutions come with the integrated LTE. Both of those solutions come with the integrated stateful firewall, and then the LTE specific model has the ability to insert the data SIM. Now, double clicking into the home user use case, let's look at the ISP plus LTE model. So the scenario is some customers, they have a dedicated ISP service for home workers. Maybe it's a dedicated line, but in other scenarios, we've seen where that first link is a shared service with home users. Now, from a security perspective, you don't want those home users to connect to the SD-WAN solution. From an administrative perspective, you can allow that and enable it. However, you may want to choose to keep them in their existing home network and deploy your remote work network and limit it to the users and devices that are intended for work purposes. So in this scenario where the home users are essentially contending for traffic for that first WAN link, you want to enable certain features like adaptive bandwidth detection on the SD-WAN so that we're utilizing that WAN link, that first WAN link effectively. And again, the second WAN link is going to be dependent on your SIM card and your data plan, and whether that's going to be in a standby state or an active state. Now, from a home user use case where we're sharing that first link, there are some routers that have advanced quality of service capability that you can prioritize the SD-WAN traffic, which is going to be primarily the one that's going to be backhauled through the virtual path as encrypted UDP 4980 traffic. So if you can identify that UDP 4980 traffic and prioritize that above Netflix and YouTube, you're going to better serve your home user network. So that's something that is not really an SD-WAN capability or requirement and configuration, but rather a suggestion you can make to the home users if they fall into this scenario, right? So that's just something to keep in mind. But the adaptive bandwidth detection feature on that WAN link, if you enable it, the SD-WAN will try to avoid that contention and ensure that we're leveraging other transports as needed. Okay. And the other thing to account for is connectivity to the cloud service. So by default, the device is going to be in a factory default state. It's going to call home using zero-touch deployment on WAN interfaces, and that could be 1/2. That could be the LTE interface. By default, in factory default state, DHCP client is enabled by default. It will connect, if you connect your device on that 1/2 interfaces to your home router, it will obtain an IP address like any other laptop that you connect to your home router. And that IP and the DNS that is configured on that interface will then initiate the call home process to cloud services to obtain the configuration. And again, it's taking advantage of the serial number that you're referencing from the appliance and the site configuration. And after the device obtains that configuration, it will essentially apply the configuration, meaning we purposely lock down the WAN links for security purposes. And now we're leveraging maybe a LAN interface 1/1 for management, and we are sending it through our own firewall and that internet service that I outlined earlier to break out for internet, and it would be double natted in this scenario and allowed for connectivity for cloud services. So that means that after zero touch is done, your remote administration can continue to pull that device from that data interface for analytics and also to make configuration changes as needed. Okay. Now, some of you may already have a Citrix SD-WAN deployment in your production network. So you would have an MCN at the data center or the cloud. and that's connecting to SD-WAN devices that are deployed in remote offices. Okay. Now with this 110 appliance and the work from home requirements, you may want to consider adding a new routing domain with the Citrix SD-WAN solution. So what does that mean? That allows you to create VRF Lite type capability on your SD-WAN at the head end, where you're managing separate route tables. One route table will manage your default routing domain for your robo deployment, and a new routing domain to manage your home users. And you're also segregating the network, and you're dedicating and limiting resources to the home user using the new routing domain. And the home users that are connected with their SD-WAN, they're going to only be enabled for that default routing domain. So that allows you to kind of segment the network and allow some separation between corporate traffic that's leveraged from remote offices versus these new home users that are added, where you're protecting, you're limiting the scope and entry into the corporate network from these home users. In addition, depending on how you want the home user to access, if typically they don't need management access to the device. So you can enable management access on the 1/1 interface, and that is essentially what the home users are connecting into in terms of the network. So if you want to eliminate data access on that interface, you can leverage another interface. In this case, if it was a 110, it would be the management interface, or the 1/4 interface, port number 4. And you can put port number 4 in a default routing domain. You don't have to cable anything in, but from an administrative standpoint, when you're building your site, you're identifying that, okay, port 4 is going to be a management interface. Nothing's going to be cabled into it, but I still am able to access cloud resources using internet breakout with it, and I'm still able to access that device in terms of management. And you can accomplish that by backhauling that management traffic, or accessing that management traffic through the default routing domain, which this SD-WAN can also have multiple route tables, right? You have the default routing domain, which includes the management of the device, and all the rest of the traffic, which would be the home user traffic, would be segregated to the home user routing domain. Okay, so you can access the device GUI leveraging this new in-band management capability that the 110 provides with that type of configuration. And that POC guide and the reference links that I'll send at the end of this presentation go into a little bit more detail on how to configure that and make use of it. All right, and with SD-WAN Orchestrator, site profiles and templates are critical in simplifying the deployment. Okay, so again, you want to limit the type of profiles and templates that you want to create. You don't want to just enable. Every user is going to have their own requests, and as an administrator, you want to kind of keep them focused on what will serve them best and address their problems. Now, from a cloud orchestrator perspective, their site profiles and WAN templates allows you to templatize the different site structures. Maybe you have an SD-WAN sitting behind existing routers, or you have an SD-WAN and HA pair at certain branches that are operating with the WAN links directly connected into them, or you have home users in a different routing domain that are connecting through multiple WAN links. But you can create site profiles so that as you're adjusting configuration changes on the individual, on the site profile, what that does is Orchestrator will then replicate that across all the similar sites that are associated with the same profile. So it makes it easy to manage. It makes it easy to kind of control and put a narrowed focus on the type of use cases that you're supporting with SD-WAN. So site profiles are available in SD-WAN Orchestrator. You can create the site profile. There's interfaces and device WAN link configuration changes that you can do again centrally, and that replicates through all the various sites. And it's important to create, to make it easy for creating user sites. So there's a batch creation process that allows you to create multiple users. So you select the number of users that you want to create. you can associate them with a site profile so that when you hit that create button, it'll perform the majority of the tasks that you typically would do to onboard a home user, and it will automatically associate with them with the profile where you're just inputting then whatever is the delta that you typically would. So it makes that easy. And there's business intent-centric policies that you can perform at a global level to control routing, to control firewall policies, and to control application QoS policies centrally without having to be very granular with each user. You just do it at the global level, and that applies to all users. And that could control essentially what you're allowing across that backhaul through the overlay tunnel. You can allow voice over IP, prioritize that as the highest priority, and then you could allow Citrix Workspace, prioritize that as the second priority, and block everything else. So that you're blocking, again, locally to that device at the home user. And in addition to that, you could have additional security policies at your data center to further protect the network, but you're limiting it to those resources that are available there. You can also leverage those central policies to decide to allow certain traffic to leverage the local internet service. So breaking out locally at the branch site, leveraging the multiple internet links, you can decide to only allow Office 365 and to block everything else from internet access. So you have that granular control and central control, which is important when you have to deal with thousands of deployments. And the majority of the home user use case is centric around quick and easy rollout of the solution. So zero touch deployment is a very key contributor or feature that contributes to successful rollout of home user SD-WAN devices. And just to give you more detail as to the actual workflow, in SD-WAN Orchestrator, the first thing you'll do is to create the user, and you're associating, again, the serial number with the site user, okay? And that configuration, essentially, that's what's intended for that user. And as the device calls is plugged in and powered on by the installer, it will automatically call home with its serial number. And once that authentication is done with that serial number, the configuration from the service is handed down, which is, again, specific to that device, and then the device will automatically go through the automated process of installing the configuration. It will actually communicate with Orchestrator and say, this is the software I have. In order to join the SD-WAN environment, do I need an update? And if the updates are required, then it will actually hand off software updates and install the license and then activate the service. And the cloud service runs through the same workflow on any devices that are following the same procedure of cabling for internet and powering on. So it will handle in parallel all these devices that will need to call home and address that scale requirement in our cloud service. And then once the devices are available with active configuration and they're cabled for the WAN links, the virtual path will be established between the head end, master control node or regional control node, and the remote client nodes. And with that continued management connectivity to the device, either through the internal firewall of the SD-WAN or being backhauled through a DMZ and broken out for connectivity there, SD-WAN Orchestrator will pull these devices for analytics, and it will use that connectivity for management for configuration changes or software updates that need to be applied centrally through SD-WAN Orchestrator. This is a view of the new 110 appliance. This is the LTE model, so it has those antennas. There are essentially data ports that are available on these new SD-WAN devices. In the case of the 110, there's the 1/4, 1/2, and the LTE. They serve as data ports, and they will, by default, in a factory default state, attempt to call home. So if you have a SIM card inserted and you don't have anything else cabled, it'll use that LTE for zero touch. If you don't install the SIM card, and if you just plug in a internet connection to 1/2 or the management, it will use those interfaces to call home. So there's default functionality to denote those as WAN ports. They have DHCP clients enabled on those interfaces to obtain an IP address from the underlay network, and they have DNS so that they can, resolve connectivity to cloud services. We have a installer workflow video available on YouTube. I'll again share the links to all this at the end of the presentation, but you essentially follow basic installer workflows. You unbox the solution, you mount it, either wall mounted or desk mounted, whatever you need, and then you use one of the zero touch deployment options in terms of WAN interface or LTE interface to perform zero touch. It's easy enough for a home user to do. It's also, you could also leverage third-party solutions to pre-stage these devices and have them shipped to the individual users with the configuration already on there. So again, flexible, makes it easy to for any installer to make use of. Now, once the devices are, set up by the administrator and orchestrator, the user has run through the installation at the home office. As the devices come online, the SD-WAN networking administrator has a high-level view of all the deployments, all the SD-WANs that belong to their network. So that collective view gives you an easy consumable dashboard so that you can see issues before they become problems and act accordingly. So the solution gives you visibility into the health of each deployment, the health of this virtual path that virtual path that's created between peer sites with these lines that are connecting to your MCN or RCN. And you collectively view all users with the ability to drill down to specific users to gauge the health of that individual deployment. And you can look at certain WAN link conditions of the virtual path performance in terms of latency, loss, and jitter. You can identify from a user dashboard their specific top applications in terms of bandwidth consuming apps, and the view metric based on the time scale that you're selecting. There's also alerts and uptime, which will help you identify problems within the network and helps you identify your underlay network in terms of reliability. So SD-WAN is designed to make use of all the different WAN link variances that are connected into it and keep the network alive. But it's always good to identify that, hey, you're encountering 50% downtime on your primary internet link. We should kind of think about replacing that possibly to make sure that the variants of WAN links that are available are going to be more readily available when you actually need them. And you can drill into the WAN link quality, which is essentially a next level down in terms of troubleshooting and analytics, to see unidirectional path measurements and usage of good availability of that link or bad availability. And the individual member paths are broken down granularly, so you can see the upload and download separately in terms of availability and how that impacts the overlay, the virtual path, which is essentially the aggregate of those two. Okay, and you could change that from availability to conditions such as latency and jitter and loss, so that again you can take action on certain WAN links that may be poor performing for users and move them towards better networking. And looking at the user app usage is key in identifying what type of applications that are on the work network for this home user. You may want to take certain application access off of the list of available apps that they can access if they're consuming too much bandwidth on applications that are not very business centric. So it gives you some way to monitor, and then manage and police that traffic as you need for traffic that's going through the virtual path. And as a remote administrator, you'll want to pull analytics from that box. So you can dynamically click the retrieve latest data option for any user so that you can see in real time their flows, the sessions that are active, the TCP, IP information, what routing domain they're using, what WAN service they're using, not only to help help them in troubleshooting any performance issues that they may be complaining about, but identifying what segment of the network may need some attention or moving them to a different WAN service to improve their performance as a potential workaround. And you could all, collect the information remotely through Orchestrator, and you can push configuration changes remotely through Orchestrator. The firewall, similarly, the firewall activity is useful to look at live applications and see what the firewall is doing in terms of allowed traffic or purposely blocked traffic or closed traffic. Okay, with that, I think it's good to do that next polling question, and then we'll transition over to Valerie to close.
Sure, and this is the one about features?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to launch a quick poll for everyone. And the question is, what do you think is the most important feature for an SD-WAN home user case? So we showed a number of options. Are you interested in, say, power over Ethernet? Can't imagine many people would have that, but we're interested to know. Is authentication important? .1x over LAN and Wi-Fi, or USB security? So it looks like just waiting for some people to come in and vote. And while that's happening, Shoaib, there's an interesting question in chat. So we're seeing a lot of detail on statistics, and a lot of information is available to show how the network's behaving. Are there any tools that you can recommend to help simulate traffic or generate traffic to help create some of the policies that one might want to deploy?
So typically, I do leverage JPerf. It's a graphical tool that will allow for identification of full bandwidth. So when you install iPerf at the server as a host machine and iPerf on the home user, you can run the tool and identify how much aggregated bandwidth you're getting from the link simultaneously. So that's useful in making sure that your SD-WAN is functioning properly and you're actually seeing aggregated bandwidth as opposed to just a bandwidth of a single link. I also use just basic ping and managing the size of the packet so that I can identify if the packets are being fragmented and if I have to adjust the MTU size in the home user use case, as well as remote branch office use cases. That's good to kind of make sure that your performance is optimal by using the right MTU. And SD-WAN Orchestrator does give you the ability to enable active MTU detection on the various WAN links remotely, and then alter the WAN links or hard set them to the MTU that the SD-WAN between peer SD-WAN devices are managing. So those are just some suggestions.
Awesome, thanks so much. Yeah, I think that helps a lot because a lot of our audience here would be very interested in how to fine tune some of that, as well as look at the information. So with that, we have a good participation in the poll. So I'm gonna go ahead and close that out and share the results real quick. It looks like the number one feature that folks are interested in here is wireless authentication, so .1x for Wi-Fi.
Yeah, so I should mention that the Citrix 110 devices are being shipped Wi-Fi ready. We do have software updates coming in Q3 that will enable Wi-Fi capability, and 802.1x is top priority on that.
Awesome. All right, so back to you for your slides.
Actually,
Yep.
Valerie will close out here.
All
Yep,
right.
it's fine. Just use what Shoaib's got up there now. So just to round out, when the COVID crisis or pandemic closures lift, sorry, I can't speak, and your business starts to work on plans to send employees back to the office, we have to be considerate that many analysts are predicting that work from home is here to stay in a bigger way than it ever has been before. You have to ask yourself, will your employees want to return to the office if their jobs could be done remotely? And will investments being made now for IT carry over to result in a permanent trend? And employees may even get comfortable enough with the new mode of working and ask for a business class option. So something to consider. I think many people will want to go back to the office, but you never know in what capacity and, based on what location you're in, how that's going to look in the future down the road. So I think there will need to be some kind of business continuity work from home plan in place going forward that was more robust than it ever has been in the past. And just to finish up, we have some great resources. We have some resources on our webpage around finding the best SD-WAN solution and what to consider when looking at different SD-WAN vendors. We have an infographic currently for this business continuity topic, and we are going to be providing very shortly some new Gartner research on business continuity and work from home, and including some SD-WAN into that. Tech Zone is an area on our docs that has a lot of technical information. You can find the new tech solution brief, design decisions, POC guide, lots of technical learnings on that site. I encourage you to check it out. And then we have a webinar that we recently did on remote work. So that is now on demand. And below at the link, there's our new use case page on our website. So under the SD-WAN product pages, you can find that. And then we had a consolidated reference list here of all the different links that hopefully was already pasted into the chat for you so that you can take this away immediately and start doing additional research on your own. Again, we appreciate your time, and hopefully this is very helpful for you in your business continuity plans, and you can see how SD-WAN might fit in as a use case. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Valerie. Do we have time for a closing poll, or
Yeah,
what would you
so.
prefer there? Okay, closing poll. We have the final one about learning more, or the 110 appliance. So I'll go ahead and launch one final poll for everyone here. So we've had quite a bit of content, and we just focused today on SD-WAN. This topic comes up occasionally, and perhaps we could give it a little more light on this webinar and other formats. So we're interested to get your opinion here. Just real quick, yes or no. Would you be interested in learning more about SD-WAN functionality? Specifically, would you be interested in more one-on-one behavior there? Just say yes, or perhaps just more content in general. You could say yes there, and we will try to adjust accordingly, as we realize that SD-WAN is a very, very important product at Citrix, and it gets a lot of visibility, and it really strikes a good note with all of you, our customers. So we've just got the links coming out in the chat, so you can go ahead and start to explore on your own. All of this content will be shared out in an email following the webinar later this week. So if you're unable to get to the links in the chat window today, or perhaps you just like to take a look at it some other time during the week, rest assured this content will be coming down in the slides that we'll be sharing in an email at the end of the week. So I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll, and it looks like awesome, we hit the mark. So, and it looks like you guys are hungry for more. So that's amazing. So it looks like there's an overwhelming interest in learning more about the SD-WAN, new capabilities and features. So fantastic. So thanks so much, Shoaib and Valerie, for presenting today. So with that, we're going to move into our final section here, and I'm going to go ahead and take control back and share out my screen. Give me just 1 second. All right, so that brings us to the closing for our webinar, and where I'm going to cover a little bit about what's happened this month and what do we have coming up around the corner. So what's new is we have a new blog all around business continuity for the ADC. So we have covered a lot of these topics in past Networking Masterclass webinars. And in this particular blog, former Masterclass host Jason Poole goes into detail in a several-part series. So this is part 2 of a multi-part series. And what this covers is what the features are that are available to you in the ADC, from pooled licensing to the various auto scale and scale on demand technologies. So I invite you to take a look at the blog here written by Jason, or even start with part 1 to get a deep dive on what are the features available, what are the different ways that you can expand and grow the business, or even adjust the business to respond to immediate peaks in demand. So a very good blog. It came out this month. I invite you to take a quick read. Really succinctly captures a lot of the features that address specifically business continuity on the ADC side. Now, in keeping light with the content from today and very timely this month, is we have a new release available for the SD-WAN Advanced Edition, and that includes new integrated edge security features. So we have a blog that succinctly goes through all the details of this release as it's focused on the edge security feature. So if you're interested in learning what is new there, what new integrations do we offer in the Advanced Edition, I invite you to check out this blog by our team member and product manager, Reshma. All right, so with that, if you're interested in building out any of this solutions or just figuring out how some of the advanced features interact with each other, I invite you to check out our validated reference design documents. These are put together with use case deployments in mind. So if you want to learn how to, say, do auto scale in on-prem, in the cloud, or perhaps you want everything to be active everywhere, I invite you to take a look at our advanced documents. This is under, you'll find this under docs.citrix.com. On the link on the slide, we have more details there as well because we're referring to the blog here. But it is easy to find. It is an advanced level of documentation, and it supplements the general documents that we have that go into the features one by one. So if you're looking for how all those features come together, I invite you to check out our validated reference design documents put together by myself and Stan from the product management team. If you're interested in more networking specific or focused content, we have an entire playlist available on YouTube at the Citrix TV channel. So the link to that specific playlist is available on this slide, or I invite you to go to YouTube, punch in Citrix TV, and then go drill down under playlists and look for the networking playlist. And there you'll find all topics related and focused on Citrix networking, including new SD-WAN product features, the ADC features, and you'll also find the MasterClass in that playlist as well. Finally, what's coming up next month in our MasterClass? So for July, we're going to focus on our microservice-based solution with Kubernetes. So if your DevOps teams are starting to get more entrenched into Kubernetes, or you're starting to hear about it a little bit more in terms of your business needs, we'll have a webinar that discusses and goes into detail some of the advanced features that we're developing at Citrix, specifically when it comes to securing microservices based on Kubernetes. If you've heard some of the, I would say the antagonists or the people who frown on Kubernetes as it's a shared infrastructure, just rest assured that we are taking security to heart with our product solution, and we work together in Kubernetes to help secure the product and make it more visible and more agile for your business needs. So with the ADC, for example, we can go in and monitor the SSL connections. We can even enforce authentication so that microservices cannot freely connect to other microservices. Think in mind, maybe a developer goes in and makes a change that's not authorized by the business, or perhaps there's some kind of compromise that a microservice is under or being attacked, in which case it may make an incorrect connection. So the Citrix ADC and the CPX product integrates with Kubernetes to prevent a lot of those problems from happening. So join us next month. We have presenters, Komal and Mayur, and they'll go into a lot of great information, a lot of detail about what we're doing to secure microservices with Citrix ADC and have visibility with ADM. All right, here's the fun part. So you've made it this far with us toward the end of the webinar, and this is our chance to say thank you for joining us for the entire hour, a little bit over an hour. And this is where I get to give away our prize for paying attention. So I'm going to ask a question from the content today. And the way this works, if you have not participated in a prize yet, is that I will, when I ask the question, if you could have the questions panel open, go ahead and post your answer into the questions panel. So I ask, before I bring up the question, I ask just if you've won a prize from us in the last 6 months to please hold back from answering your question. You can still answer, just maybe hold back half a minute to a minute to give some of the newer people to our audience an opportunity to win the prize today. So with that, I'm going to bring up the question. So get your hands on your keyboard and get ready to win this awesome prize, the Ember Mug 2 with temperature control. So this is a neat, smart mug. So the question for today's content is, how many SIM slots does the Citrix SD-WAN 110 appliance provide for wireless LTE backup? So we mentioned that there is a number of options when it comes to LTE. LTE itself is a backup. We mentioned that there is a slot for a SIM card, but how many is supported? And it looks like this was maybe a little too easy for the audience. So that's awesome. So good participation there. So congratulations, Roman G. So we will follow up with you after the webinar. You are the first person to come in with a correct answer, which is 2. We support 2 SIM cards on the SD-WAN 110 appliance, and we allow you to basically provide your own SIM, and they do not have to be on the same carrier. So that by offering the 2 SIMs, we encourage you to actually use 2 different providers. For example, in the US, you would have one AT&T SIM and maybe another one on Verizon, just so that you had the option of a backup carrier, perhaps using some different spectrum of the network. All right, well, that brings us to the end of another great networking masterclass, and it remains only to thank our fantastic crew of presenters. Thank you, Valerie and Shuaib, for putting in all that extra time and preparing such great content and sharing it with us today. And of course, thanks to you, our audience, for sticking around and for making this so much fun with your questions. I'm Dave, and until next time, hope to see you next month. Bye-bye.